Hello, everybody. This is the Design System Social Club, and today we're gonna get our very best friend, Danny. Hello.
Hello.
Danny is from Amazon, as you probably already know by now, and he's the creator of Style Dictionary, and overall an awesome guy. And then we have live from his car, Killig. Yay! But Killig,
Yay.
oh, there's Killig. Do you want to say something, Killig? No, he doesn't. Don't get in a don't get in an accident, Killig. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah. Drive safe.
Yeah, put the autopilot on your Model X Tesla, Killig. I'm joking. I don't think he's driving a Tesla, so it's gonna be human driver for now. Anyway, unfortunately, we don't have Jen nor Jenny today, but they are our usual partners in crime. And I guess today we're going to talk about dark mode. So yeah, Danny, do you want to start by saying, I don't know, anything, or do you just want to jump like right in?
Yeah. Let's just jump right in.
Okay. So I don't know if we can start by, and Killig will probably join us like from his office space soon-ish. So we'll see how it goes. In the meantime, I don't know if we should start by saying like, do we like dark mode? Do we don't like dark mode, and why? Yeah, why not start simple, right? Well, like, What is your overall feeling about dark mode? Danny, do you want to start?
Yeah. My overall feeling, I generally think it's a bit overhyped. I mean, I don't mind apps having dark mode and light mode. I mean, my personal site has a very simplistic light mode and dark mode because it's what all the cool sites and apps do nowadays. But in general, the ROI of having light mode and dark mode in your application, I don't think is quite there. There are arguments for saving battery life, and it can be easier on your eyes and stuff like that depending on the context. But I think just doing dark mode because it's cool is a bit overhyped, I think. So I mean, most of the apps that I use other than like VS Code are all just default light mode.
Yeah, no, I totally. I mean, I feel like we're pretty much in an agreement there because, like, I actually, as a user, yeah, I guess I have some apps that I use in dark mode. Twitter would be one, for example. I know that usually I prefer it in dark mode. It's actually interesting that Twitter has, I think now, two different dark mode. Like, there's one that is like completely black, and then there's one that is like very dark blue, if I remember correctly, and I don't even remember. Yeah, I saw that the other day. But yeah, I mean, I guess my personal opinion around this is that, like, if it's just to have like this shiny new object that everybody wants without really knowing why and what's the use case and what's the benefit for your own product, yeah, and as you mentioned, the ROI, right? It's like, to me, like, maybe it's because I'm the one who's actually going to build it. But, like, if you tell me, hey, I want a dark mode, I'm like, yeah, do you know how much time we're going to have to spend on it to do it correctly?
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing, right? It's like, I feel like in maybe some people mind, it's just like, yeah, you just, invert stuff
colors and it's done.
And you're good to go, right? So yeah, I mean,
yeah, that there's like even huge downsides to trying to do it. Like, doing dark mode poorly, I would say, is worse than not doing dark mode at all, because you could get a really terrible experience. And I can say, without maybe getting into too many specifics, having an app that is half dark mode some of the time is worse than just not having it at all, where some pages are light mode and some pages are dark mode, or some parts of a page are light mode and some are dark mode,
Yeah.
that is the worst experience in the world. And it's
Yeah.
it makes your app completely unusable. So there's a huge risk depending on how complex your application is, and how complex your front end is, how many pages you have, that type of stuff. So there's a huge risk in actually trying to do dark mode and doing it poorly than just not doing it at all.
And it's funny because it's even like the smaller things, right, that can just like get your experience down. Like I remember that, for example, the stupidest things, but like you're using Slack and you have like all your emojis and stuff like that, but actually they're not transparent.
Yep.
Or they are, and suddenly like you're using dark mode on Slack and you're like, what is this thing? Either because because on dark mode like you don't see it, or you like you don't see the contour as well or something like that, or on the other end like it has like a white background, like it's a little square, it just looks like crap. So again, maybe that's the designer in me that is like, yeah, it looks terrible, maybe people don't care, but I actually think that overall it just proves that you didn't think it through, and so it's actually very tricky to do it correctly in my mind. And so
I think also with like user generated content, so like applications like Twitter or like GitHub, like things where people are creating content, like that can be a little bit tricky as well. Like people are used to Twitter and GitHub being kind of a light mode by default application, and so there might be they might create images or use special Unicode characters to like change the color of emojis. So like using like a black heart might become invisible on dark mode when they're just trying to have a cool black heart emoji. So I think it's even more difficult with like applications of that type versus just kind of like a here's an application that shows you some data that you can control all of the content for.
No, definitely. And so even more, I want to say, so for the people that might be watching this and don't know that I work at Intuit, so we're like from a design system perspective, having a dark mode, it's not just having a dark mode, it's basically multiplying everything by 2. And by that, I mean that, like from my perspective, like the design system IDS that I work for, we already have multi-dimensions because we're supporting multi-themes by product, multi-platform, web, iOS, Android. And as soon as you're adding dark mode to the mix, you're actually multiplying everything by 2. Because now I need to, like for every component, every token, everything, suddenly you have to say, hey, how does it differ in dark mode? And I want to say that obviously maybe some part of your documentation, like a button is still a button, light mode, dark mode, doesn't matter the usage, but the specs will change. And so with that, it means that, and I'm talking to the creator of Style Dictionary here, but obviously it means a lot of overrides if you're in dark mode. But also, like, for example, like even documentation. How do you document for each component? Suddenly you have 2 more use cases. So it is definitely not trivial in my mind. And so, again, it's not like I'm not against the idea, but I don't think that necessarily people, users and or leadership understand really like what it means behind just saying, oh yeah, we should have a dark mode. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have any experience yourself, like trying to support it outside of Style Dictionary?
Yes. So we the app that I work on, the Amazon Seller mobile app, we recently launched dark mode for Android. We're currently working on dark mode for iOS, and it has been a challenge to say the least. And I think our application is definitely more challenging than probably most because of the tech stacks that we have. Hold on one second. There's a leaf blower right outside my house. But because we have like each screen in our app could be a different type of UI that's rendered, a different kind of UI rendering platform.
Mhm.
And we have so many pages in our app and dozens of teams that own different pages. So like we don't own, like our team doesn't own all of the content in the app. And making sure that you do enough regression testing and you do like enough testing on all of the pages. There's also like very interesting things like, so in Android, I believe dark mode was started in Android 10. And all the documentation said like dark mode kind of starts at Android 10. But Samsung phones starting on Android 9 enabled dark mode, but it was
Mhm.
only Samsung phones. So like there's like this weird case of like, if you're Android 9 and you're on a Samsung phone, we need to be able to like test for that. So there's like with Android, there's a kind of matrix of different like flavors that you could get for dark mode, which adds on to the complexity mix. So basically my experience with dark mode is it is very complex, especially dealing with native
Yeah.
mobile applications. And depending on like how complex your organization is, like do you have teams contributing content to a bunch of different places? Is it centralized? How many pages do you have? How many different UI rendering layers do you support? It can be, it can be a mess. It can also potentially be somewhat relatively simple, like having light mode and dark mode on your personal site or blog. Not that difficult. CSS custom properties and the prefers color scheme media query. If you structure your CSS custom properties well, it's not that big of a task to do.
Yeah.
But comparing a personal site to a complex multi-platform application that has thousands of people working on it is too huge. They're not even in the same league.
Yeah. Obviously, I mean, the scale is so vastly different that yeah, if you have 3-page on your personal website, you can pretty much do it by hand and it would still be okay. But yeah,
Yep.
I agree that in our context, multi-platform, multi-theme, potentially multi-product, it actually adds tons of complexity. So hey, we actually have somebody's asking us a question. Hey, Donna, how are the conversations between designers and developers when implementing dark mode? Are designers informed about the design token structures? That's a very good question. Thank you, Donna.
That is a very good question. Do you want to start off with that one?
Yeah, I think yes. I mean, I think that, as I mentioned before, I feel like, to me, like at least for designers, I think that some designers anyway don't necessarily have that system thinking process where actually they don't necessarily understand all the implication behind what does it mean exactly to implementing dark mode. From a developer perspective, it's all about the implementation actually, because it's like suddenly, obviously, like you can have like different tokens, but also, as you said, it's like the hardware implementation. It's like, how do you detect that like they want the dark mode and things like that. So conversation, in my mind, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't really recall having particular conversation on implementing dark mode, and it's probably there already a problem, right? Like maybe we should have more. Yeah, I don't know. How about you?
Yeah, I think like in kind of my experience from it, I think having a good structure of your design tokens in place, generally kind of following like that kind of 3-tiered structure of like core, theme, semantic layer, and then like component layer on top, where the main kind of change for like dark mode is in that kind of theme semantic layer. So like color background primary, color background secondary, color font primary. those type of kind of semantically named tokens, where
Yep.
those kind of switch light mode and dark mode, and then always referencing those in kind of component tokens really kind of helps make it easier for designers and developers to understand, and also kind of provides a smaller surface area for people to think about. So they're not thinking about, okay, I need to go through every single component and look at every single color that I'm defining and have a light and dark value for that. You can kind of have these general kind of semantic layer of tokens that take care of 80% of the cases. Probably you might want to have your button be different colors in light mode and dark mode, and like that could be fine too, or maybe you don't, but like having those kind of layers of decisions and kind of focusing the conversation on kind of like that semantic layer, I think is important and makes it a little bit easier for people to kind of understand the broader problem.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah. But I mean, I feel like, in general, I think dark mode or not, the thing that I see times and times again is that developer will come back to designer saying, actually, I'm missing some use cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like usually the conversation goes, hey, you defined like specs for dark mode, which is cool, but actually, what am I supposed to do in X, Y, and Z cases, right? So, anyway, but I mean, we're users of style dictionary, and we do have a layer when we override values depending on are we in light mode and dark mode.
Mm-hmm.
Which actually makes me think that like in a previous company, I actually pushed the envelope a little bit there, because I was actually explaining that to me, like, there's a difference. So first of all, there's a difference between dark mode and dark theme, in a sense that to me it's all about like what is the. I mean, you can have technically like dark mode is really like almost a hardware feature, right? It's like it actually goes to like night mode or dark mode, depending on
context.
Yes, it's a context switching, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dark theme, on the other hand, is almost like up to like the user's preferences, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And the other thing that I actually pushed the envelope on is the fact that to me it's about like context switching, and especially the background of your UI component, right? Meaning
Mm-hmm.
that yes, light mode, dark mode, ultimately you can simplify it by saying, hey, the background is white or the background is black, even though probably not the greatest idea if you're using pure white or pure black.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is that what happens if it's on top of a color, any color? How does that actually change, like, again, like your like your UI element, right? Mm-hmm. And it actually happens more than you think at first, right? It's like, what if I want to have a card that is yellow or orange, and on top of it I want a button? Chances are that whatever is already defined for white or black doesn't necessarily work well for this. And black and white is kind of like, like it's a binary thing. But if you start to actually envision, what if it's any color? And so there is actually, like, also like to me, like a very interesting challenge, but also like a slightly different problem. So I don't know if you ever had to think about it in this way, but I find it interesting. Luckily for now, I don't have to support that in my design system, but I can tell it's gonna come one day. Anyway,
and one thing to like I've kind of thought about as well as like for the kind of like having text on kind of different colors of background, different shades of background and stuff like that. One potential thing is moving to just kind of different levels of transparency for pure black and pure white text. So like primary text color is like 90% opaque black, then secondary is like 80%. And then regardless of what, color that text is on, it will kind of scale with the background that it's on, and kind of flip side for dark mode as well. So you don't need to worry about like, okay, I want this specific hex value, and then I need to test that hex value against a range of potential background colors that's going to be on. Obviously, this is kind of very hand wavy and not like fully thought out, but that could be one way to kind of tackle that issue of like variations of text colors and background colors, especially in like light mode and dark mode.
Yeah. That said, I mean, personally, I'm always a bit like cautious to use opacity because actually, I mean, if you're up at a design system level, if you're opening opacity as a possibility for your users and especially for your designers, I felt like sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it's actually a way to cheat and like introduce new colors, which is obviously a nightmare down the line because, it's like, as we said, light mode, dark mode, it's like, hey, yeah, your opacity works for, like it works for, because you're thinking about it as being like with white as a background, but the day I change that, your value may or may not work, right? And so like having a lighter gray or something like that is, cheating with opacity. That said, if you're using it correctly the way you were describing, yeah, definitely. And ultimately, that's actually the solution that we envisioned when we were thinking about, hey, what if you have a color, like a color background, then probably opacity is the best solution because you can use like a black with a 50% opacity. And then, the font color being white or something like that, it actually gives you enough contrast to make it accessible and things like that. But so it's not simple for sure. Kelly apparently has some issues to come to the stream. So I don't know, probably his camera is not working properly. Let's try. Hey, Kelly, can you hear us?
Howdy.
Hey.
There he is.
Yeah, so no camera for me. But so I want to address the first question, which was, do you like dark mode? I think for consumer apps, sometimes I agree that it could be overrated. However, nowadays the app ecosystem is that you go from your phone to your TV to your car and back and forth. And then on my TV and in my car, I do want dark mode, especially in certain times of day. So I think that it's a bit weird that it took Apple to introduce that into iOS for the world to really care. Not just on iOS, but everywhere else.
As usual.
Yeah, the same happened for responsive web design for mobile payments. You're going to see that happen over and over again. But yeah, it's a funny thing that's happening every time they announce something. And so I would, put a... Yeah, I do agree that not every website might need it. But when you're talking about apps and websites that are being used all day or in low light environments, it has tremendous value. So just want to put that out there.
Yeah, you're right.
Especially like maps, like Google Maps or Apple Maps, that kind of, if you're driving at night, you do not want that to be light mode. I think, and also like depending on the type of application, like I don't mind like switching between applications. Like Spotify is just dark, and that's fine for me. And like I'm used to that, and I'll go from like Spotify to like Gmail, and Gmail's light. And like I don't need all of my apps to be like light or dark at the same time. Like it's fine for me to switch between them. But I think some specific apps, like when you're on the TV or phone, really need dark mode, I think.
Yeah, actually, I wanted. It's too bad that Jenny is not here today because Jenny works at Netflix, and I just wanted to know: do they have like the opposite problem? It's like, is anybody asking for light mode for Netflix? It would be so funny.
They do
right?
have one. They do have one. If you go to Netflix Kids, I believe.
Okay.
It's light. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. It might not be on all platforms, but at least on Android, I believe you get a light background. Yeah,
that's so funny. I just assumed that it was always on black, but yeah, okay, right.
And likewise at Shopify, we have a few products that are not necessarily very web centric. They're very app centric. One of them is the point of sales, and it's what people probably think about as the equivalent would be Square when you go to a shop and you're interacting with this interface. So on our side, I think the dark mode is the default. I don't even know if we have a light mode for that. So yeah, likewise, it's the kind of this design decisions that can maybe make sense in a certain lighting environment and for some users. So yeah, no, I think it's a good thing.
And there's also like parts of apps that make sense to be light or dark mode. So I'll give an example. In the Amazon Seller app, we have like a photo taking, like photo editing experience, and that part of the app is just like dark mode by default. Because generally, when you're like editing photos, you don't want like light, like white interface around it, because it kind of drowns out the image. So we like that piece of the app has always been kind of like black background based, and like most photo editing apps are all kind of dark background.
I wonder if it's by convention, or is it like really like, is there like a strong rationale behind it?
Well, the rationale is that you want to mimic the whole Lightroom sort of effect, and so yeah.
I guess, but at the same time, who actually been to a real Lightroom nowadays? Compared to like the number of people that are editing pictures, I'm not even sure that my daughter, who's 18 now, would actually know what is a Lightroom, but she's sure I would actually embrace that convention, that to be in like a black background for editing pictures.
That's a good point. And I want to go back on parts of an app might need to be dark versus light. So at Shopify, the media manager of the admin has this dark mode. And it turns out Polaris, the design system we use at Shopify, did not really accommodate for this out of the box. So they had to come up with their own components, or sometimes make some CSS overrides, which was quite interesting. And then recently, dark mode became part of the Polaris design system, kind of in a silent way. We don't support dark mode officially in the admin. One of the reasons has been brought up before. Like, I think doing partial dark mode is hard when you're a platform. So people can install apps in our ecosystem, and we don't enforce this kind of light and dark mode like an iOS might, for example. And they have this review process that we're a little bit less strict on. So we don't force app developers to build dark mode into their apps. So that's why for now, the Shopify admin is, we don't give you that switch between the two modes. However, this media manager does have that. And I think the goal is more and more, if somebody wants to have parts of an experience that's not using the light mode or whatever the default design language is, you would be able to embed sub parts of the admin's experience and make that slightly different. So the goal, I think, long term is something that Jesenia has been talking about in her book as well, is having those kind of levers for expressiveness. Not doing it.
Expressivity.
Expressivity. Yeah, no. Read her book, by the way, if you haven't already, and it's called Expressive Design Systems. And yeah, the goal here for Polaris is to become this foundational piece that allows people to bring brand expression in not just one product at a time, but also parts of the product when it makes sense. I think that's cool. I don't know how other design systems deal with that. Intuit, I know you have a lot of brands. Amazon, I suppose you have a lot of teams working on the same parts of the product. So this might come up as well. I don't know. Do you want to touch on that, or?
Sure. Actually, so there's this question from Donna. How do you account for fear that in themes? I'm guessing it's for that. Does it count as a component with darker colors? Well, as I mentioned before, for us anyway, it basically is like another dimension that actually overrides everything. So as I mentioned before, for us, it's like every design specs has to go through multi-theme, multi-platform, multi-mode, and mode being like light mode, dark mode. So potentially, like let's say you have five products to support, 5 themes, 3 platform, web, iOS, Android. So that's already 15. And then suddenly you don't have 15, you have 30, because we're actually, for us, it's an override to actually include and maintain. So it's multiply everything by 2. Yeah. Anyway, while we're taking questions, there was also, I don't know, somebody has something to say about that?
Oh, I was gonna say, going back to kind of like parts or specific components kind of being different than the default theme or mode, you could have like, a set of like dark components where they don't have a dark mode and their default is dark mode, but you just don't specify that. Or conversely, vice versa. Maybe you have a set of components where, by default they're light, and in dark mode they're still light as well.
Yeah.
Depending on, our set of photo editing components are always going to be dark, or our set of whatever is always going to be light. So you could still make those like trade-offs and decisions of like, this component will be this theme in the, or be these colors in this context or in this mode.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, because I can definitely see, let's say like, in certain example, your primary color being, like just a color that is pretty much loaded, right? Like let's say your primary color is green, and if you know Intuit products at all, maybe you think about what I'm thinking. But anyway, so primary color green, cool. So do you necessarily want to have all of your primary button with a background green? Maybe not, because then, like you actually might be expressing the wrong message there. So suddenly you'll need to have like another primary color, and ends up that in light mode, there's a good chance that you're going to say, hey, why not black? That could work, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it works. But does it mean that you want a white button in a dark mode? I'm not so sure, because obviously like a black button on a light, in a light background has not exactly the same effect than the opposite, because the opposite is solely like it's a, like a, how can I say that? A lighthouse in the middle of the sea at night, right? So it might be like, I don't know. So anyway, yeah, that's an interesting concept, because like maybe the use of the opposite color is not as straightforward when you're switching from one context to the other. Anyway, so I know that Jack asked us a question that is slightly different, but we didn't get a chance to actually answer that question before. As far as I know, WCAG, WCAG? How do you say that? WCAG doesn't provide any guidance yet regarding how to measure contrast when colors use opacity. That's a good question. I don't think it exists. To me, it's more about like basically getting the result of that transparency on top of the background that actually is calculated. But yeah, I bet it's not.
There's a new, I can touch on that. There's a new panel in Chrome DevTools that is coming. It's available as an experiment since Chrome 89. And this panel so far is called the CSS Overview, I believe. And it's going to be helping you see all the color contrast on your entire document. So far, I don't know if it shows the opacity issues or colors with an opacity and if they have a good contrast level. However, I've seen in the Chrome bug, I don't know what it's called, but anyway, you can find it somewhere on their bug tracker. They are looking into it. So anyway, Chrome soon hopefully tells you if a color with an opacity has a good color contrast with the background.
Cool.
So, don't know, again, like, yeah, you're right that WCAG doesn't provide any guidance, but hopefully it becomes easier for devs to figure that out.
Yeah. And I mean, at the same time, as you mentioned, like to me, it's almost too late, right? It should be like the designer that actually tests those things before you get to implement them and before you actually test them in the browser. But it's better than nothing for sure. So yeah, definitely. Just to reply to Donna, because she said, so in design tokens, they must exist in the between layer. They need to be shared in one team. Yeah, that's why, like in our design tokens at Intuit, the cascade is actually theme, platform, and mode, and not necessarily like the overrides is in that cascade. So yeah, definitely. Nicholas said, it's recommended to decrease the brightness of images in dark mode to avoid too strong contrast. Yeah. How can we express this in tokens? Danny?
You could have opacity tokens and apply those to images. So like when you're in dark mode, if you output CSS custom properties, for example, you could apply, those opacities to images. Also, sometimes, like I think I've done this on my personal site, but like in dark mode, I not only kind of decreased the opacity, but like just removed the color of some images because they looked way too bright in dark mode. And
like using a CSS filter or something like that.
Yeah, using a CSS filter to desaturate it so it doesn't look so like I guess bright. I guess I probably could just reduce the opacity even more, but that's another thing you could potentially do to make images kind of blend in better if that is what you want.
And at the same, I don't know. I mean, at the same time, like I would not necessarily. Decrease the brightness is one thing, but opacity could potentially be problematic in my mind. So I don't know.
It could. It would be something that you'd have to do a lot of testing, and depending on the image and the context, it could,
The other
worse.
Yeah. The other thing that I'm thinking about is that if you want to express it in tokens, like to me, like this is basically something that you would apply to all images. So I'm not even sure that you would need a token and not just. And I cannot believe I'm saying this, but like just a one hard-coded value, because anyway, you're going to apply the same one everywhere. But I don't know.
Another thing potentially as well is you could have your image be a token itself and having a light and dark version of that image, either if it's like a PNG or you can have like an SVG and use design tokens in the source of the SVG. So you can swap out colors depending on light mode or dark mode and have two different sets of SVGs that would be kind of swapped out based on light mode or dark mode.
That's cool.
There's actually a few different ways you could kind of handle that depending on how complex and how, overridey you want to be versus just kind of applying one thing to every image.
So Nicholas, it might be better check with content and image owners also. True.
Yep.
I can see how certain photographers might actually have a say in like, don't touch my picture. Thank you very much. So definitely good point. It's actually what you were saying just reminded me, I'm totally sidetracking here, but blast from the past. I used to have my personal website being in Flash. Okay. And I tried it was just like a lab. I was experimenting a lot of things, and it was kind of like a 3D scene, but actually the background, like there was like some kind of window in the back, and the image that was displayed in the back changed depending of the the time of day, basically from the user perspective or something like that. So it's almost like what you were talking about by changing the SVG tokens, because yes, I was actually checking what time it was and changing certain graphical assets depending on what time it was. But yeah, good times. Flash, love you forever. Anyway, Kelly, do you have any other topic that you wanted to talk about around dark mode from your perspective?
Yeah, so one thing that's been covered already in the Design Details podcast, but could be interesting to folks in this audience as well, is that if your use case is to save energy, then something like a pure black, recommending a pure black for your dark mode could be good. The reason is that modern mobile devices, they use OLED type screens, and that technology saves energy when the pixels are off. Like literally, there's no electrical current going through the pixels, and you save significant amount of energy compared to a light mode, at least. Now, when you wake up those pixels, even with the lightest shade, the darkest shade of gray you can think of, you bring back up that energy. I mean, sorry, there's no energy efficiency anymore. So
Interesting.
But
So
there's
you-
a catch. There's a catch here. So essentially, pure black, pixels off, energy savings. Shades of gray, almost black, no energy savings, or way less than if you were going for pure black. Now, depending on your use case, you might want to choose for or against that. But I can say that the trade-off here is that with a pure black, you're also trading off the experience of scrolling. So whenever the user is scrolling down the page, those pixels that used to be black will have to be woken up by the user interface. So every time, so for example, let's say you're in a Twitter feed and a pixel is black because it's there's no text, there's nothing. The user scrolls, that pixel that was black all of a sudden needs to display text, even if it's for a few milliseconds while the user is scrolling down. It's got to display text, it's got to display some images, maybe an avatar, and that time it takes to wake up and go back to sleep, again, for those energy savings, there's a lag associated with it. So you see some smearing effects. So in some apps, actually, maybe you've seen that on your own phones, and it's mostly visible on phones, to be honest, because there's very little people using OLED screens as their primary monitor aside from that. So there's this smearing effect, and it's very disrupting to the user experience. So bear that in mind. Sometimes not using a pure black might be better for your use case. But again, if you're after energy savings, this is a great way to do that.
That's interesting because I've seen that when I think on Twitter when I put in like the super dark mode, and I never knew like, is there something wrong with my phone? Is there an issue there? But that makes sense that you get kind of that like streaking effect because pixels are kind of waking up and going to sleep, for lack of a better word. But yeah, I never knew that that's why that happened, but it makes sense. And it is pretty annoying for you. Like, it's very distracting when I'm scrolling.
Yeah.
And
It
this
could
is
be
why
good
we
for
have
the. So I'm just going to finish on that, but it could be good for, let's say, the Chrome of your app. So if you want to blend in completely with the camera hole on certain phones, then it's great because the pixels are completely off. You get a pure black. It's amazing. But then maybe for the zones that are going to be scrolled on, not a great place to put pure blacks.
That's a good idea for the pieces of the app that don't move, like the app header and stuff like that, to just be pure black. I like that.
Cool. And I just wanted to make a joke and say that's why we have Kelly on this live stream, because thanks, Kelly.
Today I learned.
Yeah,
My
exactly.
image right now is not a pure black. Maybe on your phone it is, but I don't, for those who are just listening, my camera is not working right now. I don't know why, but so yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, just to finish, because Donna was actually asking theme platform mode, are you treating each as a token file? Yes, we are. And if you want to know more about how we make that happen, I would suggest to go and talk to Kelly, who said hi earlier. So she's watching, but Kelly is working with me, or actually she's the main driver of our implementation of Style Dictionary at Intuit. So yeah, again, Donna, if you want to join, if you want to, you can find Kelly on Twitter and ask her all the questions that you want, because she's the one who is technically the most acute on this, on our implementation. Cool. Well, thanks, gentlemen. Anything else that you want to add? I think personally, I covered all the things that I had in mind for dark mode, but it's been a great conversation. Danny, Kelly.
I'm working on a blog post about implementing dark mode in Style Dictionary. So that will be coming out when I finish it in a week
Thanks.
or two, maybe. We'll see. Yep, look out for that.
I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure I'm going to learn a ton of things, as I usually do with your blog posts. So thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly, apart from your failing camera, do you want to talk about something else?
Thanks. So, not much about dark mode. Yeah, no, listen to that episode of Design Details about dark mode. It was great. Learned a lot. And that's more from a designer perspective, and it's awesome. And another thing, I just finished watching WandaVision. I've been
Me too.
blown away with that last episode from a graphic perspective. It's just really beautifully made. So I don't know how they do that. Like seriously, it is really, really amazing. Not only the plot is great and it's a fantastic show, but yeah. So I did shed a tear at some point, and not just because of the graphics being so beautiful, but also just it's a very emotional finale. So recommending it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll plus one to that. It was a good watch. We watched, I think, all the episodes in 2 days. But yeah, that last episode got choked up a little bit.
Are you guys? So yes, I did watch that TV show too. Are you any like Marvel Comics fan at all, or not really?
Not. I mean, like the actual Marvel comics. I do not own any actual comic books other than Watchmen.
Okay,
So
interesting. What about you, Kelly?
Yeah.
No, after Tintin, I just stopped stopped looking into that.
Interesting, because I mean, I was back in the days, especially as a teenager, I was reading, Marvel comics. So for me, like, the Scarlet Witch is such a, like a huge hero inside of the Marvel universe. I was actually kind of like a bit disappointed by at first her character because like she was like she had like such a
No spoilers.
no spoilers, but like such a big potential inside of the comic books, and then like seeing her as being just like this, like if you've seen the Marvel movies, like moving objects, telekinesis and this kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, cool. But actually the Scarlet Witch can do so much more than that. So I feel like it was great for people that actually read the comics to get that with WandaVision, which is obviously like influenced by some stories that actually happened decades ago in the comic book. So I love how they actually reinterpret those things. And I think it makes it very interesting. And I agree with you that the overall, I think it's funny because so when I started to watch WandaVision with, I was just like by myself, and my wife actually passed by, and she was like, "This is weird." And like, yeah, this is the weird TV show that I'm watching. So like WandaVision was labeled the weird TV show in my house because like the first episodes are supposedly like following like convention and codes from like 50s TV shows and 60s TV shows and so forth and so on. So I thought it was a great treatment, honestly, of the, like just overall talking about like, as you mentioned, like the design and like the imagery overall of the TV show was really well made. And I'm sure they had a blast to create all that, like I'm always thinking about the crew behind it, like with the costumes, the props and everything. And I'm sure it was super interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, thanks, Kelly. Great pick. Danny, do you have anything to recommend?
This might sound weird. It's on Netflix. It's called Murder Among Mormons.
Okay.
My partner and I really like true crime stuff. It's a mini series or like a docu-series. It's like 3-hour-long episodes or whatever. Really interesting. It's not like just like it's not just about murder. There's like a lot of interesting history and stuff about Mormonism and like historical documents and stuff like that. Really good. Also, Law and Order UK is awesome. It's like Law and Order, but in the UK, and so we really
No, I'm shocked.
it's very interesting. We've watched a lot of those episodes, so if you like Law and Order, or mostly we don't like the original Law and Order because it's kind of boring. We watch Law and Order SVU, but if you like that, you like Law and Order UK.
Okay, cool. Well, my personal pick is not going to be a TV show. Sorry, guys. I'm actually, I picked like probably the Google Chrome extension that I'm using most, and it's called Spaces. I don't know if you ever heard about it. And so basically, Spaces is this idea that actually it just tracks all the different windows that you have and all the different tabs, and you can name them. And then, like with 2 or 3 different shortcuts, it's very easy to go like from one window to another. If you close that window, you can call it back with all the tabs and things like that. And personally, I'm just using it all the time, and also like redistributing. Let's say I open a tab in one window, but actually I want it in something else. Very easy for me to have like a shortcut keyboard and just move it to like the right space that I have in mind. And the great thing is that even if you're like shutting off or restart your computer, you can actually go back to those things. So there are tons of extensions that can track your tabs and stuff like that. This one for me is the one that works pretty well, and it's just, to me, like oftentimes it actually saved me from like looking endlessly to the tab that I'm looking for. So yeah,
just have one window with like 50 tabs open all the time, like I do.
Yeah. So I separate them in different windows, give them names. I can even basically close them until I need them. Like I don't have to have them all open all the time. So yeah, it's good to, yeah. And Donna, who is by now like almost like an official member of this, says she used containers in Firefox. Sounds familiar. Probably. So Donna, big shout out. I do use Firefox for my personal browsing, and then Chrome for my professional browsing. I don't know why I do that. I just do. I like to use both, and actually sometimes it helps me catch stuff. But yeah, and then a lot of our viewers have actually apparently opinions about extensions. Kelly, hey Kelly, I like using Toby to keep track of sites I need to check every day. Yep, Toby is also a great extension, but it's funny. It's just slightly different. I think Toby is mostly like on your homepage when you start a new window, where you get track of like all the things that you kept before. For each his own. Is that the English expression there? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, for each his own. Yeah.
Cool, gentlemen. Thanks again for coming today. I hope the next one will be back with Jen and Jenny, because we're missing them very much. So yeah. Any final words, Danny, Kelly?
Happy Friday.
Bye everybody. Stay safe.
All right, bye folks.
Bye.
See you next time.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you for listening.